members and attendees, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for our patience as we get everything set up for you this morning. My name is Melanie Ramel. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Bureau of Cannabis Control. We have an exciting big day ahead of us. Glad you're here to join us. I do want to remind folks that we are live webcasting this, so folks perhaps across the state are also watching this meeting today. A few housekeeping items. We have restrooms in the back and a few restrooms here to your left. And I want to introduce Tamara Colson. She is the Assistant Chief Counsel at the Bureau of Cannabis Control.
Thanks, Melanie. Thank you for being here today. I'm the Assistant Chief Counsel from the Bureau of Cannabis Control. We have a team of lawyers that work with me to help us with the Bureau in their processes. I'll be here today for any legal questions that come up.
Thank you, Tamara. And now I'd like to introduce Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs, Dean Grafilo.
Good morning, everyone. Again, welcome to today's event. Such a pleasure to have you all here, both in person as well as the webcast live. I'd like to go ahead and start today. Could I ask all the advisory committee members to please stand while I mention the oath? Go ahead and raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations.
Great, so this meeting is called to order at 10:28 p.m. 10:28 a.m. And now I will establish a quorum through a call of the roll. Avis Bulboyan.
Present.
Dr. Timon Cermak.
Present.
Matt Clifford.
Present.
Bill Dombrowski.
Present.
Jeff Farrow.
Present.
Kristen Heidelbach Teramoto. Present. Eric Harada.
Present.
Alice Huffman.
Present.
Catherine Jacobson.
Present.
Arnold Leff.
Present.
Kristen Lynch.
Present.
Kristen Nevedal. Present. Joe Nachita.
Present.
Lavon Peck.
Present.
Matt Ron.
Present.
Keith Stevenson.
Present.
James Sweeney.
Present.
Tamar Todd.
Present.
Helena Williams.
Present.
David Woolsey.
Present.
Ben Wu.
Present.
Beverly Yu.
Present.
Great. A quorum has been established. And now I'd like to open agenda item 3. Director Grafilo, an overview of the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Prior to that, I'd like to first introduce Madam Secretary Alexis Podesta. Alexis Podesta is the Secretary of Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency at our parent agency to which we support. She was appointed Secretary in February this year after serving as Undersecretary since 2015. As Secretary, she oversees 9 departments, including ours, that are responsible for funding affordable housing, civil rights enforcement, banking and financial transactions, consumer protection, and the licensing of 3 million working professionals. Before coming to the agency, Secretary Podesta served as the Director of External and International Affairs for the Office of Governor Jerry Brown. There she led outreach, communication, and partnerships with stakeholder groups, as well as provided key support for the governor's special projects. She was also the governor's lead on international affairs and served as chief of protocol. Alexis also spent nearly a decade in Washington, D.C., working first as Director of Scheduling for U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein. Welcome, Secretary Podesta.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you, Dean. Nice job on that swearing in. I've trained you well. Welcome to the first meeting of the Cannabis Advisory Committee. It's great to see you all this morning. I appreciated getting to know some of you a little bit better prior to this. I'm incredibly proud of the team and all of the very hard work that's gotten us here to this day over the last 2 years, I think it is. Yeah. This is a big deal. Our Department of Finance estimates conservatively that in fiscal year 2018-2019, revenue from cannabis-related businesses will be nearly $700 million, growing to more than $1 billion in 2021-2022. Again, those are conservative estimates. The actual amounts could well be greater. And while other states have preceded us, California is by far their largest state to regulate cannabis. A very wise man, also known as Governor Brown, once said, California, since the beginning, has undertaken big tasks and entertained big ideas. This is a big task started by a big idea. Today, you'll hear about emergency regulations that are being put in place by the Bureau of Cannabis Control, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and the Department of Public Health that will allow us to begin regulating cannabis on January 1st. Implementing these regulations is just the beginning of our journey. Each of you will play a key role in our work going forward as we create permanent regulations that will have to be put in place next year. Lori, you and your team have done a valiant job. Thank you. I know you are all eager and motivated to get to work, so thank you again for being here today. I look forward to working with each of you. And I think, Melanie, I'm supposed to ask if there's public comment?
Yes.
Any public comment? All right, great. So, Dean, back to you.
Thank you, Secretary Podesta. On to agenda item 3, where I'm going to briefly give an overview about the Department of Consumer Affairs. For those of you that aren't aware, the Department of Consumer Affairs is the premier primary lead organization for consumer protections here in California. We do it via the 39 boards, bureaus, programs, committees, commissions, via the licensing enforcement and education programs for each of those entities. There are approximately 3,700 employees at DCA, offices throughout the state, from healing arts boards to non-healing arts boards. And the Bureau of Cannabis Control is one of the latest additions to the 39 entities here at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Very briefly about some of the things that have been happening at DCA since I came on board this past March. Since my appointment, the Department and the Bureau of Cannabis Control have made great progress in implementing the Medical and Adult Use Cannabis Regulations and Safety Act. The Department and Bureau have held over 20 outreach events related to licensing and to provide comment on the regulations. In addition, the department established the Office of Student Assistance and Relief, appointing a chief and hiring staff. This office is charged with education and outreach to students to private post-secondary schools. In June of 2017, the department implemented a new training and mentoring program, the Future Leadership Development Initiative, to begin identifying its next generation of leaders. The initiative is a partnership between the department and its boards and bureaus that is guided by the steering committee of the executive officers and run by the department's Solid Training and Planning Solution Unit. This program will help the department address the workforce succession needs, and we look forward to continuing it on an annual basis. We've also redesigned the department's license lookup for ease and access of speed and assumed the regulatory authority of the household good carriers industry. And as you all know, just this past October 4th, the members here of the advisory committee were appointed. In establishing the committee, we wanted to make sure that it represents members from all the various stakeholder communities, that the committee represents the many diverse voices, locales, perspectives of California and cannabis, and that the 22 members do in fact have the necessary experience to make the committee successful. Can't say enough how very much I'm looking forward to the weeks ahead, and I join all of you in the effort as we start to regulating this new industry. This item, welcome public comment on this item. Seeing none, I'd like to briefly introduce Lori Ajax, the Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Cannabis Control. Ms. Ajax was first appointed to the Bureau in February of 2016. Prior to that, she'd been at the Alcohol Business Control since 1995. She worked her way up through the ranks at ABC and becoming its Chief Deputy Director in 2014. Without further ado, Ms. Ajax.
Thank you, Dean. Good morning, everyone. So glad to be here today and very excited to be here at our first advisory committee meeting. And so I'm going to give a brief overview of the Bureau of Cannabis Control over the last, I guess it's been about 22 months. And it has been quite the journey, so I'm anxious to bring more people like the advisory committee onto that journey with us. And of course, all of you and your participation have always been there since the very beginning. I do want to recognize we have the Bureau of Cannabis Control executive staff here. We have a lot of staff members here. We can't introduce them all, but I'm going to tell you this is a fantastic team, just tremendous team. So they're probably not going to want to stand, but I'm going to ask them to stand. Well, you know Melanie, she's our Deputy Chief, Melanie Ramil. Tamara Colson is our Assistant Chief Counsel. And then we have Alex Traverso, who's in the back. He's our Assistant Chief of Communications. Andre Jones is next to him. He's the Assistant Chief of our External and Intergovernmental Affairs. And then Ricardo Dela Cruz, he is our Admin Assistant Chief. And where are you, Ricardo? There he is. And then we have Connie Bouvet, who's our Assistant Chief of Licensing, and she's over in the corner, and Paul Tupi, who's our Assistant Chief of Enforcement. So that is our executive team, and we're all here today to serve you. And so I'm going to get into our overview. So as most of you know, the Bureau was created back when the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act was passed, and that created the Bureau. So we started out with one person, and that was me, and then we've been adding. So we've gone from 1 to we're now over 30, which is pretty impressive. And I'm telling you, that number changes on a daily basis because we are constantly hiring because we're getting ready to make sure we're ready for go live. We started out with doing a lot of public outreach coming from the alcohol industry. I really didn't have a lot of knowledge about the cannabis industry, so once we got a few people on board, we started going out across the state to hold informational sessions. And really that was done so we could learn about the industry, we can hear about concerns, and then we can just introduce people to a new bureau because it's unusual in state government to have a new state entity crop up. So we went around the state doing that. We did 9 of those sessions, and then during that time, we also met with the industry. We toured cannabis businesses because really we were on a mission to learn because we knew we had to put into effect our draft medical regulations, and we thought it was very important we understand the cannabis industry. So that was a tremendous experience for all of us. From there, we followed up with having pre-regulatory meetings across the state. That was in September of 2016. And from there, we floated some regulatory concepts, the things that we had developed, and then we had discussions with people in the industry to get their opinion on it. And we did those across the state. We did 8 of those. And then right after that, we took comments from people. We were developing our medical regulations. And in November, Proposition 64 was passed overwhelmingly by the voters. And so that expanded the role to the Bureau from not just medical cannabis, but also adult use cannabis. So at that time, we had 2 statutory systems that was going to regulate adult use and medical cannabis separately. So we continued forward with drafting our medical regs, And as most of you know, we came out, all three licensing authorities came out with their medical regulations in late April and early May. And we put those out there. So the Bureau put theirs, and as you know, at that time, we were regulating the dispensaries, the distributors, and at that time there was transporters and the testing labs. California Department of Food and Ag had the cultivation, and then Department of Public Health was regulating the manufacturers. So we put those out there. We held public hearings. All three departments held public hearings across the state. And we got public comment. And then, as most of you know, on June 27th, Governor Brown passed the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act. See, I'm getting that down. It keeps changing, so I got it down. That then merged both the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act with Prop 64, so we have one system to regulate both adult use and medicinal use. So what that meant for our medical regulations is those we had to pull back and then start developing new regulations for the new statute that was put into effect on June 27th. However, so many people came out to our public hearings on the draft medical regulations. It was overwhelming. And all of those comments, and I'm going to tell you, they were valuable for all three licensing authorities. Those helped us shape the regulations that you're going to hear about later this afternoon. And so all of you should give yourselves a hand because you had a part in making sure we got on the right track. And I am very proud of what we've come up with, but I'm going to say, with the help of this committee, we know these are just the start. These are emergency regulations. This is just the start to make sure we can meet our statutory deadline. And then come next year, we're going to go through that regular rulemaking comment, hear public hearing, and Tamara is going to talk a little bit about that also later this morning. So that's where we are today. We're looking forward to introducing you to our new regulations, but although we've hit this milestone for these emergency regulations, there is a lot of other things that all three of us have been working on. As many of you know, we've entered into a contract with the University of California, San Diego, and their medicinal cannabis research. They're doing a study on the effects of cannabis consumption on driving performance. We expect that's going to give us valuable information on cannabis impairment while people are driving. So that is a 3-year study. We're a year and a half into that study right now. As most of you know, we've changed our name. I think the Bureau of Cannabis Control is our 4th name change. I know, it's hard to keep up. Our business cards we can't even keep up with our business cards right now. So we have, our communications team has done just a tremendous job. They launched our website. They launched the Cannabis portal, which is cannabis.ca.gov, which is a one-stop shop for everything cannabis. It's a way into all the links to all the licensing authority and any state agency involved in cannabis regulation. And then when we got our new name, we relaunched our website. We have a new logo. We added social media to our public presence. We are Facebook, Twitter, and just recently we added Instagram. We're also moving from our current facility because unfortunately, Dean's kicking us out because there's not enough room for us. I'm just kidding. So we have a new facility that we'll be moving in at the end of the year. So that's pretty exciting to house us. And by the way, of course, staffing. We're continuing to staff. And I'm going to say none of this is possible without the staff that I have. They are dedicated to getting this done and doing it right. And the tremendous support I've had from both the Department of Consumer Affairs, Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, and the administration as a whole. We have all pulling together to make sure we get this right. So we're all on track to have our online, and of course we've all been developing online systems to take online applications for all three departments. So we're all on track to begin accepting licenses next month. and to be issuing the first state cannabis licenses come January 1st of 2018. So truly a historic time, and really I thank everybody for being here. Thank you very much. And is there any public comment?
My name is George Bianchini. We're licensed or attempting to be licensed in Oakland, and we are going to be getting several licenses in Marin County. I'm here today because of an incident that happened related to Prop 64, but it kind of goes to what you're talking here. You say you're ready to go live. Well, number one, in Prop 64, it wasn't just cannabis or marijuana that was discussed, it was also industrial hemp. Now, I realize that you have put together a whole board that deals with industrial hemp, but you didn't give them any of that $30 million that was supposed to be appropriated in Prop 64.
Excuse me, sir. Unfortunately, right now, the public comment is related to
That's
her.
exactly why I predicated it by saying related to this topic. So point of order, I am commenting to the topic and the agenda at hand.
You can talk about anything she talked, but the hemp was not part of this, so we'll need to save that for the other public comment period.
Because she said that they're ready to go live, and you're not ready to go live. It's going to take, for most of us, at least 6 to 9 months, maybe a year, once you come up with the rules and regulations to comply with them. You're not even ready to come out. You're telling us now for another month. 6 months ago, it was going to be right around the corner. There is no way for us who plan on doing this legally to do this in the time that you have allotted. So I'm saying this now just so that you can alleviate all the lawsuits that'll be coming with language that says you're ready to go live. Now, back on that ready to go live. Hemp is not ready to go live. $30 million was appropriated in Prop 64. Some of that money needs to be given to hemp. And I say that because I'm also involved in a 46-acre hemp grow that was turned over by the sheriff in San Joaquin County that says Prop 64 doesn't exist in my town.
Excuse me, sir, again, we can't get into the hemp topic on this agenda item right now. So please stick any public comment you had strictly to the topics that Ms. Ajax spoke to.
Okay, I'll just sum up with, you're not ready to go live. Thank you.
Any additional public comment? We'll move to agenda item 5.
Again, before you begin, I just want to remind you that public comment on agenda items need to stick to the agenda item itself. Later today, there's a space for public comment for items not on the agenda. So if those are some of those issues you'd like to discuss, please save those for that public comment period. And please make sure the public comment you're making with each agenda item stays within that particular agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Susan Tiffin. I and my partner Paul Hansberry are the liaisons between the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors and Sacramento. And thank you all for the work that you're starting to do. We very much appreciate it. But we're also very, very concerned. And I imagine this comment would be primarily toward Ms. Ajax in terms of fees. But before I address that, could we have, kind of hearkening back to our high school classroom, could we have a show of hands? Is anyone here a farmer? Are there any other farmers? Okay, so we have one person who is a farmer on this advisory committee, and therein is our concern.
Excuse me, ma'am. Again, you need to stick with the topic for Ms. Ajax's report. Other topics can be dealt with later in the agenda.
I understand that. Would fees be appropriate to address, since Ms. Ajax and a number of other advisory committee members mentioned the millions of dollars that we're going to realize for our state? So would that be appropriate?
If you say very strictly into what they mentioned, yes, but the details of fees are down the road.
Okay, well, I will try my best to do that. In Mendocino County, which is host to literally thousands of small artisanal farmers like myself and my partner, many of whom grow primarily CBD-rich plants, which are vital for cannabis medicine. The aggregated fees now are greater than our median $45,000 income in our county. And we do not want to see continuance of illegality, but many of us will have no choice. And so we are very, very concerned that the fees are realistic, not for giant corporate grows, but for those of us who have formed this industry. And we are getting the feeling that we will be collateral damage if the fees continue to escalate and don't address the smaller farmer, perhaps a fee tied to the number of plants grown or the canopy or drip line of plants. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to agenda item number 5, Cannabis Advisory Committee member introductions. We'll start with Mr. Bulpian and go around the table.
Avis Bulbullion, I'm CEO of Siva Enterprises. I'm president of the LA Cannabis Task Force.
Dr. Tim Cermak, private psychiatry, and I am past president of the California Society of Addiction Medicine.
And I'm Matt Clifford. I'm a California Water Project attorney for Trout Unlimited.
Bill Dombrowski, California Retailers Association.
Jeff Farrow, Director of the Cannabis Workers Rising Program for the United Food Commercial Workers Union.
Kristen Heidelbach Teramoto, International Rep and Cannabis Division Director for the Teamsters.
Good morning. Eric Harada, Chief Deputy Director for the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control.
Alice Huffman, President of the California Hawaii NAACP and National Board Member.
I'm Catherine Jacobson, and I'm here as a patient advocate.
Arnold Leff, I'm the County Health Officer for Santa Cruz County and Director of Environmental Health for Santa Cruz.
Kristen Lynch, I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Service Employees International Union.
Kristen Nevedal, I'm the Chief Compliance Officer for Sunfed Inc. and the Chairwoman for International Cannabis Farmers Association.
Good morning, Joe Nikita, the Cannabis Management Officer for LA County.
Good morning, my name is Levon Peck. I own Native Network Consulting with my business partner, and we consult in Indian country.
Good morning, Matt Ron, Mayor Pro Tem with the City of Temecula.
Top of the day, Keith Stevenson, founder, CEO, Purple Heart. Also the Director of Strategy for the Los Angeles Cannabis Task Force.
Good morning, my name is James Sweeney. I am the founder of Sweeney and Associates and also a member of various equity organizations for the cannabis industry.
Hi, I'm Tamar Todd. I'm the legal director for the Drug Policy Alliance.
Good morning. My name is Helena Williams, and I am a captain with the California Highway Patrol.
Good morning. David Woolsey, a sergeant with the San Jose Police Department.
Hi, I'm Ben Wu, President and Chief Operating Officer of Kush Bottles.
Good morning, Beverly Yu. I am the policy analyst for United Domestic Workers, AFSCME Local 3930.
Thank you, committee members. Any public comment?
George Bianchini, Medicone, MC Pharmaceutical, SG Farms. The board seems to have an awful lot of attorneys on it, which is great. We're going to need them. And some of my concerns is we have a lot of union representatives here too. My concern is that I think this board should do more to protect us from these folks than to have them on the board. Case in point, I testified for the FBI, although it never needed to go to court. We went through all their depositions on the UFCW's extortion of the cannabis industry, including myself for a large sum of money. And that person just received his sentence and went off to jail. But I think that if we're going to be forced with union representation, and I say that I'm also a UFCW member as of right now, but I think as we're going to be forced with union representation, which is a good thing we have all the attorneys here, because that will be challenged, is that they should at least not be criminals, not be classified as organized crime. They should be here to help the organization, not to have their own sideline business. So that was one of my concerns on that. So that's all I really have to say about the board. Otherwise, thank you very much. I also agree you're doing probably an impossible to get done job. And so some of us from the public are here to make sure that particular part happens. We're not going to go into hemp. We'll wait just a little while. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ray Prez. I'm from the California Equity Business Association. We're just now forming. About the board, we already have an issue with this board. One, you guys talked about stakeholders, and I guarantee you on this board, there is no one on this board that got caught up in the war on drugs. None of you. And because of that, these are folks who are serving time right now that's been caught up in the war on drugs. There needs to be some representation, and Mr. Director of Consumer Affairs, everybody's serving at your pleasure. There needs to be someone from our community in what they call the hood in Sacramento. Now, one agency is, incubator agency is calling themselves the hood. There needs to be, like I said, someone on this board that was affected by the war on drugs. Now that it's going to be projected to be a $7 billion market in California, it's legal now. We got all of these other folks coming out of the woodwork. You're putting people on this board that probably never even used cannabis, which is, when it was illegal, probably a good thing. I really wish that you guys look, especially you, Mr. Director, of bringing in a stakeholder who has been affected by the war on drugs.
Okay, well, since there doesn't appear to be any more public comment, we'll move on to the next agenda item. And there'll be a PowerPoint on that screen over there if you want to kind of, oh, is there one there too? Okay, I can't see it from my seat. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Bagley Keene Open Meeting Act here today. Some of you may be familiar with it. Others of you may be familiar with the Brown Act that governs local public meetings. They're very similar, so we'll talk about a little bit about that today. So we're going to start first with why we're here. And why we're here is because the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act included a provision in statute that this advisory committee be convened, and it tasked this committee with certain policy orientation responsibilities. So, because of that, it falls into the category of the state boards, commissions, and committees that must comply with the Bagley Keene Act. The purpose of the Bagley Keene Act is transparency and transacting the public's business. So Government Code Section 1120 talks about how the Californians don't yield their sovereignty to agencies that serve them. Instead, they insist on remaining informed. There are several rights granted to the public in the Bagley Keene Act. The right to attend, to record, to comment, to copy records. So this is an opportunity at these meetings for you to participate in the process. Moving on to meetings, there's a formal definition of meetings, which includes any congregation of a majority of the members of a state body at the same time and place to hear, discuss, or deliberate upon any item that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the state body to which it pertains. That's a really long legal phrase that basically says when the majority of the members of this committee are together to talk about committee business, that needs to be done publicly. This applies not just to committees, it also applies to subcommittees in certain situations, and it requires that we notice the meetings and that these meetings are open to the public so that they can participate. There are some exemptions in certain situations that the committee members could all be in the same place and it wouldn't be a meeting. For example, if they're all attending a conference or it's just a social activity where the business would not be a transaction or they're simply acting as an observer member of the public. So that's how we figure out which meetings are subject to this act. Notice requirements. The agenda notice for these meetings need to be posted at least 10 days prior to the meeting and provided to any person who's requested notice of those meetings. I think probably many of you are already on at least the Bureau's listserv or have sent in a request for mailed copies of things, so you would get those notices either in the mail or electronically, depending on how you've identified your preference. If not, go ahead and get yourself on that list if you're interested in having those notices. So the notice is going to set forth always the time, the date, the location of the meeting, a contact person at the state agency to give you more information. All the locations must be ADA compliant and open to the public. Let's talk a little bit about the rule of three. The rule of three is a sub-rule under this Open Meeting Act, and it basically says that if there is a subcommittee, so a subcommittee of this committee to work on a specialized task or topic, and it consists of less than 3 people, that does not have to be noticed as a public meeting. One thing to keep in mind, the rule of 3 applies to the total membership of the subcommittee. It doesn't apply to the number of committee members on the subcommittee. So if you were to have a subcommittee that had 2 committee members and 2 members of the public, you would reach that rule of 3 and that meeting would have to be noticed as well under the Bagley Keene Act with the same requirements. There are some very specific provisions to have meetings on a shorter time frame in very specific circumstances. That's not something that's happening here today or something that probably will come up too often for this advisory committee. Let's talk a little bit about the agenda for these meetings. So that notice and agenda, again, it must be prepared 10 days prior and posted on our website. It needs to describe the specific items of the business to be considered or discussed. It cannot be generalized. It has to provide enough specificity that members of the public know what topics are going to be addressed at that meeting in case they'd like to attend. No generalizations, old or new business, and the general rule, and I think we've had a little bit of that today, is that if an item's not on the agenda, the committee is prohibited from talking about it or taking any action. And of course, that's to allow that notice period so that people who want to be here for a certain topic can be. So from time to time, you'll hear me jumping in saying we have to stay within the parameters of the topics on the agenda, but that's just to allow for the appropriate notice and the transparency required by the Bagley Keene Act. There will be a public comment for items not on the agenda later today, and because of this general rule, just understand that you definitely can make that public comment, but unfortunately at this meeting today, the committee will be able to listen and receive that information, but they won't be able to discuss it with you or take any action on that particular item today since it's not on the agenda and there's not proper notice of whatever it is you might want to bring up that we haven't included for today's meeting. So the next piece is disclosure of documents. So basically when documents are submitted to the majority of the body for consideration, we also have to make them available to the public. unless they are exempted from the Public Records Act. Those are some special exemptions for documents that often contain people's personal information and things of that nature. I know for this meeting we published on our website at the Bureau the meeting materials that were passed out for this meeting today. So you should already have those or have had the opportunity to see them. Open session. These meetings take place in open session. Typically, open session means any member of the public, like you're doing today, can sit here and listen to what's being discussed by the committee. There are certain provisions that allow closed session, a non-public session for very specific items. Many of those items will likely not arise with this advisory committee, but some of those are individual privacy matters, employment matters, litigation matters, those sorts of things that are not normally confidential communications. Communications, that's the next big thing. The Bagley Keene Act requires that the committee does its business in public and that it's transparent. So there are restrictions on communications between committee members regarding the subject matters that are in front of the committee. And these prohibitions are in place also when you use technology, emails, phone calls. So if we can't have what we call a serial or hub and spoke communication, for example, that means one committee member talks to another committee member who talks to another committee member, and suddenly you have had a meeting, but you've just all spoken about it serially instead of in one group. That is prohibited under the Bagley Keene Act. There are some provisions for one-way communications and things about logistics and those sorts of things, but when they're talking about the actual topics that you're going to be advising about, you all need to, as we all know, be very careful that your discussions happen here in this public forum and not in separate meetings that wouldn't allow the public to participate in that process. Remedies, penalties for act violations, there are penalties. The decision could be overturned. There can be efforts to stop the violations. Costs and fees could be awarded. And in some instances, criminal misdemeanors could be imposed for violations of the the Bagley Keene Act. Brown Acts for the local. And finally, ask your counsel. That would be me, committee. So that would be me and the wonderful team of lawyers and analysts and secretaries that work in the legal part of the Bureau, helping as we can. So if you have any questions about how the Bagley Keene Open Meeting Act works, we want you to ask. We want to make sure that you're well informed, understand the parameters and what your obligations are, and transact our business publicly in front of the public as required by Bagley Keene. So that's just a quick bird's eye view about how these meetings will proceed and how you'll need to conduct your communications. If you have any questions right now, I'm happy to answer them. If not, and you have questions later, you can always reach out to me as your legal counsel, and I can assist you with your question. Is there any public comment on this issue? Okay then. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Tamara. Moving on to agenda item number 7, the discussion and possible action to approve, modify, or reject the Cannabis Advisory Committee 2018 meeting schedule and location recommendations as recommended by the Bureau. We just passed this out to folks in the audience. It is available on our website as well. And I'll take a moment to go over the Bureau recommendations in your packet. The Bureau recommends the meeting schedule for 2018 to be bi-monthly. That is every other month. So the recommendation is to have 6 meetings next year in 2018 on the 3rd Thursday of the months the committee meets. Today is the 3rd Thursday, and we have full participation, so that's our hope for all of next year as well. Considering meeting locations for next year, of course, we know with launch day January 1st, an exciting new year that we'll be entering, we want to make sure that the committee and these meetings are accessible to all Californians throughout the state. So as you'll see, the recommendations do have us moving throughout the state throughout the year. So I'll go down the line. In January, the recommendation is to meet again in Sacramento. In March, Los Angeles. May, Oakland. July, San Diego, September 20th, Humboldt County, and in November, Fresno. So I'll give the committee members a moment now for any discussion.
Thank you. I have a question. Are there attendance requirements? And if there are a couple of dates that's in conflict with other obligations, how can we handle it properly?
Sure, I can speak to that issue for you. So in order to have a meeting, you're going to need to have a quorum. So if for some reason a meeting's set and there's not a quorum, sometimes you might have to adjust the dates. There are options too for teleconference participation. However, you need to understand that any teleconference site must be open to the public, must be ADA compliant, must be on the agenda, and the board member must actually be there to go forward with a teleconference. So if the committee today adopts these dates, then you would need to probably come back to the committee to move them. The other option is that certainly you can communicate administratively with the Bureau staff about logistics.
I'd like to ask a question just with respect to the November date. A number of people in attendance here probably came straight from Las Vegas. There is an annual industry show where it's always the same week. And especially next year, I'm sure a lot of people here are likely to be part of that convention as well, but they sure would love to have representation and participation here. Is there any way that we could look at that date and try to move it around?
Yes, as we open the floor for discussion from all members, there'll be an opportunity for any of the committee members to make a motion, and you can modify the recommendation and then adopt it as a committee. So if you would like to move then for the November date to change and put a motion on the floor, that's possible.
Yeah, I'd like to propose it, but I just don't know what I would suggest, but I'm not familiar with the procedural aspects here.
I can make a motion. So I move that we move for the month of November to the second Thursday of the month for our meeting to allow those of us that are interested in participating in the National Conference for Cannabis to
second that.
Yes. Comment? Yes, Steve. Go ahead, sir.
On your point for the Las Vegas event, I'm going there right after this today, and I think you'll find for next year it doesn't start till the next day, so it actually won't interfere with that if the new date causes any problems. I just wanted to bring everybody aware of that because I know that most of the industry does go to that. So, thank you.
I have a question to clarify exactly how many board members constitutes a quorum.
A quorum would be a majority for this
Just a
committee.
majority?
So that would be
13?
13 for a 22-member committee. Is there any further public comment? Sir, were you still interested in in moving forward with the motion? Could you please repeat it for everyone now that we've had the public comment?
Yes, I make a motion that we change the draft date for our November meeting to the second Thursday of the month in order to allow participation from board members and possible attendees to allow them to attend the National Conference for Cannabis Workers.
What is that actual date?
In Las Vegas, Nevada?
No, the date.
November 8th, 2018. Thank you. So the motion currently on the floor is to adopt the Bureau recommendation with the modification of the November date to the second Thursday of the month, which is November 8th, 2018. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
additional public comment before the vote is taken? We'll do a roll call vote. Avis Baldwin,
Yes.
Dr. Cermak,
Yes.
Matt Clifford,
Yes.
Bill Dombrowski,
Aye.
Jeff Farrell,
Aye.
Kristen Heidelbeck Teramoto. Yes. Eric Harada.
Aye.
Alice Huffman. Catherine Jacobson. Arnold Leff. Kristen Lynch.
Aye.
Kristen Nevedal. Jonah Cheetah.
Yes.
Levon Peck.
Aye.
Matt Ron.
Aye.
Keith Stevenson.
Aye.
James Sweeney.
Aye.
Tamer Todd. Helena Williams. David Woolsey.
Aye.
Ben Wu.
Yes.
Beverly Yu.
Aye.
Great, the motion has been adopted. Thank you so much, committee. Moving on to agenda item 8, the overview of the cannabis portal. Calling Assistant Chief Alex Traverso. Our apologies, we are having technical difficulties. We're going to have our Assistant Chief of Communications do a verbal walkthrough of
Which
our
is
cannabis
actually what I
portal.
get paid for, so I'll just go ahead and talk. Sorry about that. So basically, Lori mentioned a little bit about our cannabis web portal. I'm hoping that a lot of you have already had a chance to take a look at it. When we started this process with the web portal, it was during the launch of our medical regulations. And basically what you would see is the regulations were posted. The idea was it was a one-stop shop for people to go to that one place, find our regulations. So really that's all there was. It was just the medical regulations and nothing else. And since that time, hopefully a lot of you have had a chance to see we've added a lot of really great features to the site, including the infamous countdown clock that gives us all anxiety when we look and see how few days we have left until January 1st. We've also added not just the 3 licensing authorities, but also all of our partners. We've got EDD, we've got Fish and Wildlife, we've got the Secretary of State's office, where you can just click on a link and get to their website to see the information that they have posted related to the regulatory effort for cannabis. So we're really trying to make this site something that everyone can utilize and one place where they can go and really find out all the information you're looking for. So today, this afternoon, when we have our regulations to announce, all the fact sheets, all the regulations from each of the 3 licensing authorities will be available at cannabis.ca.gov. It has been quite the process going from back in April when we just had those 3 documents on there to now. It's been a lot of hard work, not mine personally, but Aaron's, and I'm happy to take credit for Aaron Francis's work anytime I can. So really, the additions to the website, honestly, you're going to be able to find the regulations there, information about licensing. We had workshops, 3 workshops in different parts of the state to discuss what's coming with the application process. All that information is there and available to you. We're happy to, as always, take suggestions on things that might be useful for that site. My email address is not difficult to find out there on the website, so if there are things that you think would be valuable to add to the site, we would love to have your opinion on that. And trying to think what else, what other good features we have there to point out. We've added our social media links. We have a calendar of events there. So anytime between the 3 licensing authorities or other agencies, we put any cannabis-related events on that calendar. So if you are interested in what's happening and the things that are coming up down the line, we have all those events on the site. And really, we're just going to continue to build on it and make it more and more valuable. I think we've actually started, now that we've got more things to put out there, we've started paying a little bit more attention to the analytics. So I think we had something like in the past 3 or 4 months, we had almost 500,000 page views. So it's making progress. We're getting there. And, like I said, we value your input, and please let me know if there are things you think would be a good fit for the site, and we're just going to continue to work at it and add more things to make the site a valuable tool for you. So sorry that we didn't get a chance to actually walk through it, but I think most of you can find it pretty easily or have already seen it or well-versed in going there. So please continue to check that out, and happy to provide any more info or answer any questions that folks might have.
Any questions or comments from the committee members on the California Cannabis Portal? And call for public comment.
I assumed. That document is actually on the site, but it's...
You're probably receiving so many hits on that because I go to it about 3 times a day to see if there's actually any information on it. And I have the printout of it yesterday. And so the items that you talked about are just not there. I mean, you have a list of the license types. I think we all pretty much know that you're going to either grow it or sell it or process it. But the individual information is not there. And again, my point being that we need this information in order to start a 6-month plan to ramp up to be actually able to do this. And so my point is that the website, while it has a lot of the titles done and the things that have to be done, nothing correlates to, from a business standpoint of how we actually implement it. So, and hopefully today we come up with all the rules, regulations, fees, structures, and then we're only about 5 months behind schedule. Now, I understand there's going to be a 4-month, I'm going off topic, so I'm going to surrender the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your support on the site, too. We appreciate you boosting our numbers.
Mark Whitlow, Collaborative Incorporated. Really simple question. I don't look at the site every day. I'm hoping that the communications through the email server will be the dominant way that I can depend on in getting that and not have to depend on going to the site every day.
So you're referring to the listserv, to the email list that you're on? Yeah, and all those things that you get via the listserv are on the site as well. So we try to cover all of our bases as far as communications with the public. Yep. Thank you.
Additional public comment? Thank you. So we are going to break at the moment and reconvene at 1 o'clock today. Thank you so much.
I have a question.
Sorry, Ms. Huffman. Yes.
Probably a comment, since I don't know the protocol that we've established. But there were several comments made that I feel I need to respond to. And so if it's appropriate, I'd like to do it now. For those of you who may not know my organization, it's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And the reason I'm sitting here is because of the war on drugs and the disproportionate amount of our people that were incarcerated based on that crazy war on drugs. I became an advocate for cannabis after I learned that it was cannabis that was causing so many of my community people to really have a hardship, undue hardship that should not have ever been imposed on them. For the young man who spoke, who wanted to know if someone was here representing that stakeholder, well, I have not been incarcerated, but I do have 2 relatives currently incarcerated, 4 who are ex-felons that can't get jobs, and about 20 who've been affected by the war on drugs. So until you get someone here that you think represents you, I am open to whatever input you want to give me to give to the committee. And I want to thank Ms. Ajax and the secretary for the opportunity to be here, because I do have a big mouth. And I am interested in equity and fairness and rules that will advantage, to some degree, those that have been disadvantaged by the war on drugs. Thank you.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
So before we break, Ms. Huffman, let me address your question on protocol. You're correct that this committee yet doesn't have its own bylaws or specific protocols, but typically it would proceed the same way with public comment. When an agenda item comes up, the committee certainly can comment and weigh in, and then the public can weigh in, and the committee can engage in that. And so want you all to know that that's really a good opportunity as each agenda item comes up for the committee. And if for some reason we turn to the public without turning to the committee, you can certainly flag us down or speak in between public comment or after them. So that would be how it would proceed today. Thank you.
There's an additional comment. Yes?
Yes, I would like to communicate to the gentleman who approached the mic earlier. Me, myself, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. I've faced insurmountable odds making it out. There's a misnomer that everyone from our community was involved in some sort of nefarious activity. However, I grew up in an area that was several blocks from USC, which was a safety net for us. But I'm also keenly aware of inner city drug wars, drug business, those who were targeted. I grew up with individuals that went to college. I also grew up with individuals who were wards of California Youth Authority. They sold drugs. They did what they had to do to make it. They were placed in a position where the education opportunities weren't always the best, and they took the route that they took. Not to say that they weren't raised with values, but they did what they had to do to make it out. Me, myself, I matriculated through that world, just navigating it every day of living in one neighborhood that's controlled by one gang and going to school in another area controlled by another gang. I was forced in junior high to have to schedule my physical education class at the sixth period, which was the last class of the day, for the safety of me and my residents of my neighborhood. We were guilty by residents. So when you talk about social equity, I understand what it's about. I've been in this industry for many years. I have 11 years operating a licensed dispensary. I cannot sit on this board and not think that we are here for the good of the state, and we alienate a disenfranchised community. So in lockstep with Ms. Huffman, I'd like to let you know that I understand the walk, I understand the war on drugs, I understand a lot of things. I consider it the opportunity of understanding the best of both worlds. And my opportunity to serve on this board will be with the greatest due diligence to move the industry forward for all.
Thank you both. I want to do any additional comments from the committee members before we go back to public comment. Okay. Thank you. Additional public comment?
I sent an email. I have a quick manufacturing question. I sent an email about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, to the Department of Public Health. I had some labeling questions, and I have no response yet. And so I'm wondering how long I should wait for responses before I resend my questions.
Yeah, ma'am, hi, ma'am, on public comment on that, that's something we haven't, that's not on the agenda, but you can certainly reach out to the Department of Public Health. None of these folks have here from the Department of Public Health. They will be here later for a presentation on the agenda. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erica Miller. I am currently an employee at Evio Labs. I am an associate laboratory director. And my quick question is just regarding more or less the licensing process. I know there will be a temporary licensing that starts in January, but is there a expedited process for certain types of companies and people in the industry who need to be licensed in order to start once the legal production of cannabis for, adult use as well as, of course, medicinal? Is there going to be an expedited process for people like myself who can be guaranteed licensing so that people can have their products tested for potency, pesticides?
Excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry. So that's off topic from the agenda items this
Okay,
morning.
okay.
There are some presentations later today about the regulations, which may add some clarity for you, and you can certainly comment during that.
Okay, and
piece.
and so you're going until 4, and the reason why I'm asking, because I can't stay here till 4.
Well, we'll be going as however long the meeting takes, but it should be done by 4, yes. But
Okay,
so it'll be.
and who would be the person if I can't stay here to ask that question?
You would want to reach out to the individual licensing department
Agency.
for that. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank
So
you.
this morning, this should just be on these topics we talked about this summer. We doubled back on the qualifications issue, I think, because the committee members unfortunately weren't able to speak at that point in time. So this should be very stuck with what these folks have said, just to wrap up this agenda item, and then the other items will come after the break this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to take another bite of the apple. I'm Susan Tiffin, liaison between Mendocino County and Sacramento, along with my partner. We are small farmers. We very much appreciate the 2 advisory committee members who spoke about their backgrounds, particularly in terms of addressing underrepresented and groups which have been subject to a very unfair situation. Speaking of which, are there any committee members who could speak to us about the glaring lack, save for one member, of people who actually grow medical cannabis, as opposed to perhaps the larger corporate style grows? It just seems a glaring lack, since certainly the flowers and the plants are the basis of what we're all here for. And we would very much appreciate hearing from someone about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jeff Giron, and I run a company called the NorCal Connection. We do packaging and compliance packaging, labeling. My question is mainly for Ben. Are we going to have a chance to address some of the compliance issues about packaging? Because I'm sure you're familiar with the lead times overseas. We're going to have a mad rush for people who are looking for child-resistant packaging, opaque packaging, and what verbiage needs to be on the labels. Are we going to have a chance to discuss that later in this meeting? Or is that something that we're going to have to plan for a future agenda?
There will be some presentations later on the agenda about regulations.
As far as packaging, I have quite a lot of questions.
Right. Well, so and keep in mind, public comment is to make comment, not necessarily question answering,
Well, okay,
like
well-
our other public meetings. But
Yeah.
so there will be there will be presentations on the regulations, and to the extent that there's discussion of packaging, you can certainly make your public comment period at that time.
Today?
Yes, if that
Oh,
occurs
awesome.
during the presentations, you can make your public comment during that agenda item today.
Okay, awesome.
Or you can make a public comment if it doesn't come up on the agenda later down the road in that public comment. But in terms of just a question and answer session, the best way to deal with that is to reach out to the licensing authority that would be handling.
Would that be
if it's manufacturing, that would be public health. Thank you.
Public health? Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So we will be breaking for lunch now and reconvening at 1 p.m. today. Thank you.